Deduction of TDS on airline tickets. Now, suppose there's an airline and there's a travel agent. The airline sells the ticket to the agent, who then sells it to the customer and keeps the discount. In other cases, what can happen is that the airline may sell the tickets to the agent for a fixed price, and then anything that over and above that price which the agent earns is the income of the agent. The issue which arises is what will be the TDS implication in respect of such deductions or such payments. So in cases where the agent deducts the discount, so let's say for example, suppose the airline sold the ticket to the agent for 100, although the price was 120. So there was a discount of 20 rupees which was given by the airline. Right? So the agent collects the payment on behalf of the airline, which is 120, deducts rupees 20 as commission, and then remits the balance of 100 to the airline. In such a case, when the agent deducts the commission, he has a liability to deduct TDS on such commission. That is, on this 20 rupees, provided other conditions are met, the agent is under an obligation to deduct TDS under this section. However, if the airline sells the ticket to the agent for 100 rupees, then the two are acting on a principal to principal basis. In such a case, if the agent sells this ticket further at 110, then an agent is not acting on behalf of the airline. He is acting on its own behalf, and therefore there is no liability to deduct TDS on these 10 rupees, which is the difference between the price at which he has sold the ticket and the price at which he had bought it from the airline. Now, if a bank offers certain services to its customer for which the customer makes some payment to the bank, whether TDS is deductible or not, there is no TDS which will be deducted where the payment has been made for services which are in the nature of bank guarantee commission. So if the customer makes a payment to the bank towards bank guarantee commission, there will be no TDS. For underwriting services provided by the bank, there will be no TDS. If the bank is given a credit card commission, there is no TDS on that, or even the commission for debit card does not require deduction of TDS under this particular section. Now, if there is an advertisement company which procures advertisement for a television channel or a production house, and in lieu of it gets payment for procuring advertising, the issue which arises is TDS deductible under section 194H? CBDT Circular No. 5 deals with this aspect, and what it says is that no TDS on payment will be made by television channel or production houses to advertisement companies for booking or procuring advertisement, since the transaction is on a principal to principal basis. Such payments are in the nature of trade discount, not commission. SIM card and recharge coupons. Now, if you would have noticed, there are many cases where people buy coupons to recharge their SIM cards with money. Now, these telecom companies may have certain distributors who are appointed, and these companies supply SIM cards and recharge coupons at discount to the distributor. The distributor makes payment in respect of charges which are collected from the subscriber to the telecom company. In the case of Vodafone Essar Cellular Limited, it has been held that discount given by the telecom company to the distributors is commission, and therefore it is liable for deduction of TDS under section 194H. Other payments. So if there are any large incentives and discount which are given to distributors and dealers, that does not amount to commission, and therefore no TDS is deductible under section 194H. Advertising agent commission for procuring advertisement for channel is covered. and is liable for reduction of TDS. If there are payments which are made on a principal to principal basis, there is no TDS which is deductible on such payments. Let us look at one of the most commonly used section where TDS is deducted by almost every company that is operating, and this is TDS on rent. TDS on rent is covered under section 194I of the Income Tax Act and could be in respect of rental of lease premises, etc. And one of the other areas which requires debate as we discuss this is the lease rentals which might be paid for plant and machinery. So without wasting any time, let us first get into what exactly are the issues which one should know about section 194I. The first question is, as we have been discussing all along, who are liable to deduct tax under section 194I? And if the person is liable to deduct, then who should be the recipient on whose income such TDS should be deducted? The second question is whether a particular payment qualifies as rent. What is the minimum threshold below which TDS is not required to be deducted under section 194I? When is TDS required to be deducted? And what are the cases where there is exemption from deduction of TDS under section 194I and where TDS is not required to be deducted under this section? So the parties involved in the transaction could be payer and recipient. Now the payer could be a person who's a resident other than individual and HUF. They are covered under section 194I provided other conditions are met. Resident who are individual and HUF are covered under particular situation. These are the cases where these people have actually been liable for a tax audit in respect of their business in the year preceding the year when TDS has to be deducted. And a non-resident. Even non-resident are covered under section 194I. The recipient, if he is a resident, he is covered under section 194I. But if he is a non-resident, then the TDS has to be deducted under section 195 and not 194I. So let's look at the matrix which helps you to decide whether and how to ascertain if TDS is deductible under section 194I. The first thing you need to see is whether the payment exceeds rupees 1,80,000. When we say payment, whether rent exceeds 180,000 or not. If it does not exceed 180,000, then there is no requirement to deduct any TDS. But if it does exceed 1,80,000, we need to identify what is the nature of payment for which such rental payments are being made. If they are made for the use of plant and machinery or equipment, then TDS is deductible at the rate of 2%. But if they are not for the use of plant and machinery, but for the use of land, building, furniture or fittings, the TDS has to be deducted at 10%. In other words, 1. The threshold should exceed 1,80,000. Second, if it is for plant and machinery or equipment, TDS is deductible at 2%, but if it is for the use of land or building or furniture or fitting, it has to be deducted at 10%. Let's look at the bare act or the bare section for section 194I. Any person, resident or non-resident, other than individual or HUF, who are covered only under specific situation, who is responsible for paying to a resident. So like I told you, if the recipient is a non-resident, then they are not covered. By way of rent, shall, at the time of credit of such account to the amount to the account of payee, or at the time of payment thereof in cash, check, draft or any other mode, whichever is earlier, deduct an amount equal to 2% for the use of any machinery or plant or equipment, 10% for the use of any building, including a factory building or land appurtenant thereto, or furniture or fittings. So you need to know what is the nature of payment that is being made. What is the asset which is being used for which rent is being paid. Depending on that, the rate will be 2% or 10%. What is the meaning of rent? Rent means any amount under any lease, sublease, tenancy, or any other arrangement for the use of. Sublease means what? If suppose A gives a premise to B on lease and B gives a part or the entire such lease to C, then the act of granting this is known as a sublease. It could be for the use of land, building, land appurtenant to a building, machinery, plant, equipment, furniture, or fittings. In all these cases, it will be covered within the definition of rent. What is the threshold? Like I said, the TDS has to be deducted only if the rent exceeds 1,80,000. If it does not exceed 1,80,000, then there is no requirement to deduct TDS. Let's look at some of the general provision. The rate of TDS will be 20% if the PAN is not quoted by the deductee. So the recipient has to give the PAN number. If he does not give the PAN number, TDS has to be deducted at the rate of 20%. There is no surcharge, health or education cess which has to be added to the amount of rental payment. When is tax required to be deducted? It has to be deducted at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. We have discussed this quite a few number of times. I am not going to discuss this in detail again. Rates for tax deduction: 2% for the use of machinery, plant or equipment, 10% for the use of land or building or furniture or fittings. Which payments are exempt from deduction of tax? If the aggregate amount of rent does not exceed 1,80,000 in a financial year, of course, this is something we discussed earlier. If there is a self-declaration which is given in form number 15G or 15H cases. This, like we have discussed earlier, the same rule apply here as well. Rent is paid or credited to a real estate investment trust in respect of any real estate asset referred to in section 10, subsection 23 FCA, owned directly by such business trust. The reason is that these entities are considered as a pass-through entity. So when rent is paid to them, there is no TDS, but when they distribute their income further to their investors, they are the ones who actually deduct TDS. Any rent paid to the government does not require withholding taxes. Any rent paid to entities who file their return under section 139(4)(a), which is basically in respect of charitable or religious institutions, or 139(4)(c), which is in respect of various entities whose income is exempt under section 10, provided certain conditions are satisfied. And other entities whose income is unconditionally exempt under section 10 and statutorily not required to file return under section 139. In these cases, there is no requirement to withhold tax under section 194I. No TDS on GST invoice. So there could be two cases. The rental invoice shows GST separately. In that case, the TDS has to be deducted only on the gross amount. But if there is a combined invoice which does not mention the GST amount separately, then TDS has to be deducted on the gross amount of the invoice. Refundable and non-refundable deposit. Now, in some cases, just to ensure that the premises are not misused by the tenant, and that if he defaults in terms of payment of rent, the rent can be recovered by the owner, there is an agreement which is entered between the owner and the tenant, right, where use of land and building is allowed, but the tenant may actually give certain amount as a refundable or a non-refundable deposit to the owner. In all cases where the deposit which is given are non-refundable, it is considered as rent and it attracts TDS under section 194I. So let's say, for example, if 1,50,000 is the rent which is given and 50,000 is the non-refundable security which is paid, the total amount is 2 lakh and TDS will be deducted on this amount. But if the same deposit was refundable, then there is no requirement to deduct TDS on that. Refundable deposits shall not be considered as rent and hence do not attract TDS under section 194I. But having said it, If the deposit or the security is adjusted against rent, then in that case, that will require deduction of TDS under section 194I. Advance rent. So if the owner provides a land or building to use and the tenant pays certain advance rent, then TDS has to be deducted under section 194I on the advance rent which is paid by the tenant to the owner of land or building. This is given the fact that the TDS has to be deducted at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Advance rent means that the payment precedes the time of credit or the time when it actually becomes due. Therefore, TDS will have to be deducted on such payment. Warehousing charges. So, if suppose there is a lessor who has entered into an agreement for the use of warehouse and pays warehousing charges, the rent or the charges which are paid towards the use of warehouse will be considered as rent and will be liable for deduction of TDS under section 194I. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, you can subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more such videos. You can like this videos and also share it with your friends. And if you're looking for material on this particular subject, you can visit us on our website at www.arinjayacademy.com.